There's an envelope in the third drawer of my desk. It's been there for 11 years. I know what drawer it's in. I know which side it's on. I know it's underneath an old rubber band that stopped being elastic a long time ago, and a pen that probably doesn't work anymore. I haven't opened it. My name is Harold Eugene Mast. I'm 82 years old, and I live alone in a house that used to feel small when it was full of people, and now feels enormous with just me in it. I want to tell you something, not because I think it'll help you, not because I've figured anything out. I'm telling you because I think I'm running out of time to tell anyone, and this thing has been sitting inside me almost as long as that letter has been sitting in that drawer. I was not always a quiet man. There was a time, in my 40s, my 50s, when I had opinions about everything, when I thought clarity was the same thing as understanding. I was an engineer for 31 years. I solved problems for a living. I believed that if you looked at something long enough and carefully enough, you could find the place where it broke and you could fix it. I brought that into my personal life, too. That was, I think, the first mistake, though I didn't know it then. I didn't know it for a very long time. The letter was written by my son. His name is Daniel. He was 44 when he wrote it. He slid it under the door of this house on a Tuesday morning in March, 11 years ago. I watched him from the upstairs window. He didn't knock. He didn't ring the bell. He just crouched down, pushed the envelope through the gap at the bottom of the door, stood up, and walked back to his car. He drove away without looking up. I came downstairs. I picked up the envelope. I saw my name on the front in his handwriting, Harold, not Dad, just Harold, and something inside me went very still. I put it in the drawer. I told myself I'd read it when I was ready. I don't know what ready means anymore. I've thought about that word a lot over the past 11 years. Ready, as if grief and guilt have a waiting room, as if there's a version of you that will arrive eventually, more capable of receiving hard things. That version of me never came. What came instead was time, just time, seasons. The tree in the front yard lost its leaves and grew them back 8, 9, 10 times. My wife Margaret passed 4 years ago, and even at her bedside, near the end, I thought about that letter. I thought about whether she'd read it, whether Daniel had told her what was inside it. She never mentioned it. Maybe she didn't know. Maybe she knew everything and chose silence, the way she sometimes did when she understood something I wasn't ready to hear. Margaret was good at that, patient in ways I never learned to be. Daniel and I had what most people would call a difficult relationship. That's a clean way to say something that was never clean. He was our only child. We had wanted more, but Margaret had complications after Daniel was born, and that was that. So there was just him. And maybe that's part of it. When there's only one child, there's no one to diffuse the weight of your expectations. It all lands on one person. I expected a great deal from Daniel. I expected him to be practical, to be dependable, to build a life that made sense from the outside. He was an artist. He painted. He spent his 20s working odd jobs and filling canvases with things I didn't understand and couldn't pretend to. I used to stand in front of his paintings and feel nothing, and I think he could tell. I think he always could tell. I never said the paintings were bad. I want to be clear about that. I never criticized them directly. What I did was stay quiet in a particular way, a closed, unmoved way. And I think my silence told him everything my words were too careful to say. There was one evening, Daniel must have been around 30. He'd brought over 3 new paintings to show us. He'd carried them in from his car, leaned them against the living room wall, and stood back with this expression I can still picture. nervous, hopeful, the way children look when they've made something and aren't sure if it's worth anything. Margaret said something kind. She always did. I looked at the paintings for a moment and then said I was going to put the kettle on. Just that. I'm going to put the kettle on. I left the room. I didn't think about it much at the time. I was tired. I'd had a long week. I told myself I'd look more carefully later. I never did look more carefully, and Daniel never brought his paintings to the house again. I've thought about that evening more times than I can count, not because it was dramatic. It wasn't. There was no argument, no harsh words, just a man walking out of a room to put a kettle on. But I think that was the night something shifted, not broke, shifted, the way a door shifts in its frame after years of humidity and pressure. It still opens, it still closes, but it doesn't quite sit right anymore. And if you're not paying attention, you don't notice until one day it won't open at all.
Daniel married a woman named Claire when he was 36. I liked her. That surprised me a little because I think I had braced myself not to. She was direct. She said what she thought without apology, but without cruelty either. She looked at Daniel the way Margaret used to look at me when we were young, like he was someone worth looking at. They had a daughter, Elise. I became a grandfather at 61, and I didn't know what to do with that. I loved Elise immediately, in a way that caught me off guard. There was nothing conditional about it. She didn't have to be anything yet. She was just herself, small and entirely new, and I held her in the hospital and felt something open in me that I don't have a clean word for. For a few years, things were easier between Daniel and me. Elise was the reason we were in the same room without tension sitting between us like a third person. We'd watch her together. We'd laugh at the same things. There were moments, just moments, when I felt like maybe the distance between us wasn't as permanent as I'd feared. But I didn't change anything. That's the thing I keep returning to. I felt the warmth, and then I let it pass without doing anything with it. I didn't call more. I didn't ask about his work. I didn't say once that I had stood in front of those old paintings and wished I had understood them better. I just let the easier moments happen, and then I let them end, and I went back to who I had always been. Daniel was patient with me for a long time, longer than I deserved, I think. The falling apart happened slowly, and then suddenly, the way those things do. It started with Elise's school play. She was 8. She had a small speaking part. Not the lead, but she had lines, real lines, and she'd practiced them for weeks. Daniel had called and told me about it. The date was on my calendar. That weekend, an old colleague of mine was in town. We hadn't seen each other in years. He called on a Friday, and we made plans for Saturday, and it was only Sunday morning, driving to the theater, that I checked my phone and realized the play had been the day before. I had missed it. I called Daniel immediately. He answered. I explained. I apologized. He said it was fine. He said it in the tone people use when they mean the opposite. When they've said the word fine so many times, it no longer means anything at all. He didn't shout. I want to be clear about that, too. Daniel was not a person who shouted. What he did was go quiet. Not cold exactly, just further away, like a signal fading. He still came to family gatherings. He still called on birthdays. But something that had been present in his voice for a while was no longer there. Something that used to reach toward me had simply stopped reaching. And I noticed. And I told myself he was busy, that Claire kept a full schedule, that Elise had activities, that this was just what happened between fathers and sons as the sons got older and built their own worlds. I was very good at explaining things to myself. The last real conversation we had was on a Thursday evening, maybe 2 months before the letter arrived. I don't know why I remember it was a Thursday, I just do. He had come over alone, without Claire or Elise. That was unusual. We sat in the kitchen, Margaret made tea, and Daniel sat across from me with his hands around his mug and said quietly that he felt like he didn't know how to be my son. He didn't say it with anger. He said it the way you say something when you've carried it so long that saying it out loud is all you have left. I didn't know what to do with that. I said something, I don't remember exactly what, something about how we'd always had different ways of seeing things, something careful and measured and utterly insufficient. He nodded. He finished his tea. He left. And 2 months later, the letter came through the door. And I picked it up, and I read my name on the front, Harold, not Dad, and I put it in the drawer.
People ask me sometimes, not many people, but some, whether I think Daniel wrote something terrible in that letter. I don't think he did. That's not what stops me. If anything, I think the opposite. I think he wrote something honest, something careful and true and probably generous, the way Daniel always was, even when he had every reason not to be. I think he wrote the things he couldn't say out loud in that kitchen on that Thursday. I think he wrote the things he needed me to hear. And I think that's exactly why I haven't read it. Because there's a particular kind of fear that has nothing to do with bad news. It's the fear of understanding something too late to do anything with it, of reading words that would require you to sit with who you were and what you allowed and what you let quietly slip past you without reaching for it. I am 82 years old. My hands shake a little when the mornings are cold. I forget words sometimes, not often, but it happens. I walk slower than I used to. If I open that letter and read what Daniel wrote, I will have to know, fully know, and knowing fully is a different weight than suspecting. I have been living with suspicion for 11 years. It is heavy, but it is a weight I know how to carry. Daniel and I are not estranged. I want to say that. He calls, not often, but he calls. We talk about Elise, who is 19 now and studying something with computers, and who has Margaret's eyes and Daniel's patience. We talk around things. We are careful with each other. I don't know if that's better or worse than silence. I think maybe it's just what's left. Margaret knew something was wrong between us all those years. Near the end, when she was in the hospital bed we had set up in the living room, and the nights were very quiet, she said to me once, not accusing, just gently. She said, "Harold, don't wait. Just that, don't wait." I held her hand and nodded, and didn't ask what she meant, because I already knew. She passed 11 days later. I didn't open the drawer. I'm not telling you this because I think there's something to be learned from it. I'm not sure I believe in that anymore, the idea that one person's life can be a lesson for another. I think we mostly learn our own versions of the same things, too late, in our own particular ways. I'm telling you because the letter is still in the drawer, and because today I sat in the kitchen for a long time with a cup of tea that went cold, and I thought about Daniel at 30, carrying those paintings in from his car, and I thought about his face when I left the room, and I thought about how I have spent 82 years being a man who knew how to solve problems, and I have not been able to solve this one, not because it's unsolvable, because I haven't tried, because trying would mean opening the drawer. There's a thing that happens near the end of a life. Not wisdom, exactly. I'd push back on that word. It's more like the walls get thinner.
The reasons you built for yourself stop holding their shape, and you're left with the actual thing, the actual shape of what happened and what didn't happen, and what you were too careful or too frightened or too proud to do. I was proud. I think that's the truest thing I can say. Not arrogant, maybe, but proud in a way that kept me at a distance from people who needed me to come closer. Daniel needed me to come closer. I stayed where I was and called it stability. I don't know how much time I have left. The doctor has said things that a younger man would find alarming. I find them mostly clarifying. There's a drawer in my desk. There's a letter in the drawer. My name is on the front of it. Harold, not Dad. Maybe he'll write Dad again one day. Maybe if I open it, if I call him, if I say the things I rehearsed and then stopped rehearsing, maybe something shifts back. Or maybe it won't. Maybe some things settle into the shape they're going to keep, and all you can do is sit with that shape and stop pretending it's something else. I genuinely don't know. I'm 82. I'm still learning what I don't know. If you've stayed with me this long, thank you. That's all. If something I've said reminds you of a drawer of your own, of something sitting unopened somewhere, I'm not going to tell you what to do with that. I'm just an old man who finally said it out loud.